This week on Case Studies with the Biz Doc, it's Basecamp, the wonderful project management software that's been working for people for the last 18 years, but originally started as a web design agency. I'm going to tell you where they came from, where they're going, and how they didn't raise a stack of venture capital money along the way. This week. Basecamp. Great project management software, great little company. If you've ever used it, and by the way, 20 million users have signed up or been brought into a Basecamp project at least once. Wonderful story behind the company that really started as a web design agency. So let's go back and look at the history, and then let's look at the growth, and then let's get some lessons for you and me that we can apply in our companies. First, here's the founders. In 1999, this guy, Jason Fried, and Carlos Segura, and Ernest Kim founded a company called 37 Signals in Chicago. 37 Signals was a web design agency, and they were taking on projects with various clients, and they were noticing that the bigger they got, the more successful they got, and they had a nice bit of success. They were colliding, and working on multiple projects at once created headaches, and clients said, hey, you're not getting back to me enough. Classic early success where you have to organize yourself. And they were looking around for project management software or just a project management solution. I don't know if 1999 they were even looking for the software. They were looking more a technique, a style, a process, something that could help them do it better. Well, guess what? They decided to go out and they invented it themselves to help themselves through it, and what they built would become Basecamp. So let's dive into that history. And the history really starts when another gentleman gets involved in the company, and it's this guy, David HEINEMEIER HANSSON. He was a programmer, and he took Ruby, which was a high-level programming language, and he built what would become Ruby on Rails. Now let's step through this and let's take a look at what that's all about. Ruby is like a high-level general-purpose language, and Ruby was invented by this guy, YUKIHIRO Matsumoto, also nicknamed Mats, who is an incredibly nice guy and the founder of Ruby, the initial coder of Ruby. And there was a little phrase that was developed at that time, which was Minaswan, M-I-N-A-S-W-A-N. And it really stands for Mats is nice, so we are nice. Literally, that was the reputation that Matsumoto had, and he built Ruby. So in building Basecamp, David HANSSON basically also built Ruby on Rails and then made that available to other people. And as a matter of fact, so successful was it that in 2005, it received a Hacker of the Year award from Google and others, which is a very noble award that's given to coders and people who have lent something to open source software and really moved the ball forward in terms of programming. And that's what he did with Ruby on Rails. By the way, there's something else about Dave HANSSON. He took some of his success here, and believe it or not, he started racing cars. Not something that I would let one of my co-founders do, because if something terrible happens, I lose my co-founder. But in 2014, long after Basecamp was very successful, he actually got in to be a professional race car driver, and he did very well. And here he is at the 24 Hours of Le Mans in 2014. So there he goes racing and actually wins the 24 Hours of Le Mans in his class, which I think is pretty cool. So not only was he Hacker of the Year, a great inventor to build on Ruby and to create Ruby on Rails, make it available for the rest of us, getting accolades in 2005, but then goes on to follow some of his dreams using some of his success on Basecamp. So I think that's a pretty cool thing about David HANSSON. So let's take a look at what happened. From the start as a web development, they start solving their own problem for project management. They invent Basecamp. Ruby on Rails is part of that invention, and they're off and running. They discontinue web development and they focus exclusively on Basecamp in the beginning of 2004. They start out and they move this. Within a year, they had 14,000 accounts that were using it, or 14,000 users over a subset of that in terms of accounts. And so it's off and running and very successful. 2006, Bezos Expeditions invest in it. So this is basically a Series A or even a seed investment, and they were already profitable, making money off selling it, and that would be it. There was not one further announcement of any form of Basecamp raising any additional venture capital money. And as a matter of fact, Jason Fried has talked about it almost like a drug. Like you get a bunch of venture money and now you're going to spend it and then you just raise more. You build value and you raise more. So the focus is really on not running out of money and about hiring people and spending to build your product versus the more efficient use that he thinks, and I happen to agree with, is sometimes if you just force staff to scrape by and make that first dollar of revenue, make a little bit of profit, and move from there, sometimes it builds better disciplines in the business. Well, they were already operating this web design company that was making money. So they had a couple bucks in their pocket, not an enormous amount of money, and they applied that to Ruby on Rails. And these two lines is when the revenue crossed. So when the revenue of Basecamp crossed the revenue line of 37 signals in web design, that's when they said, okay, we're done. You know, we're now going to move forward and exclusively focus on Ruby on Rails, and they set the web design part aside, which I think was smart. They were also a very virtual company. Although they're based in Chicago, there was only a few employees there. Most everybody else was spread out. In 2007, a year after Bezos and this mysterious Series A investment, or whatever it was, from Bezos Expeditions, and long before Bezos was taking expeditions on TV reporters, they reached 209,000 total users, moved up 2 years later, 09, 443,000. So you can see it's working. The business is working and they're moving on. 2 years later, 2011, 668,000 users. 2013, 1.2 million, almost doubling. 2015, up 50% again, 1.8 million. 2017, 2.6 million. 2019, 3 million. Now 2021, 3.5 million. And then now saying that over 20 million people have actually been invited to participate in a Basecamp project, and there's only one word for this, and that is damn! You did all this without raising any venture capital. What a great run you had, and along the way they invented other products to go with the core products, such as Campfire Chat, invented in 06, but that was later discontinued and rolled as a feature into Basecamp 3.0 along around 2013 timeframe. I think it was approximately the time it was done, but you can see the focus on Basecamp and not web design anymore. I think that's a sign of great discipline. And the lessons that I see here is, number one, pivot with the data. When the revenue lines crossed, they had data to work with, and they said, hey, our revenue lines have crossed. Let's focus on Basecamp. Then their focus was all in. It wasn't plan B, like if this doesn't work, we'll do something else. In the execution of web design services company and trying to get their projects right to make their clients happy and have a more organized workforce, they discover and they invent Basecamp. And Basecamp is not a plan B. It's a discovery that says, you know what? Maybe we should just set aside web design and focus on this. And they did it with data about revenue. And it was an all-in focus that said, we are just driving on the product. Then you don't always need money. Early 2004, the deployment of Basecamp, the lines cross as they sell it to some of their own customers, and they are on a revenue decision point, not just a consumer adoption or likes or registered accounts online. So this is a very, very different and very business-oriented quantitative approach to it. As we film this in early 2021, there have been some headlines with Basecamp that 1/3 of their employees left following a dialogue that the founders attempted to have with the employees over whether the company should have a voice or be a platform for societal and political issues. Apparently there were some all-hands meetings that happened here where they said, look, Basecamp, we don't think that this should be the place for societal or political discussions. Apparently some employees felt, I don't switch off when I walk into work. There was things in the media about the all-hands meeting did not go well. Some management folks said some things that may have not come off well. Some non-management people said some things that didn't come off well. And it resulted in a big explosion that spilled out into the media. And also came the story of the company saying, hey, look, if you can't work with this as we try to put this framework in place, and we're just trying to do it so that we can get our job done and not take a position and not have controversy, but here we are in the middle of that controversy, here's severance. You can, if you want to leave, you can leave. I think there's a lesson there in that you really need to involve your employees early when you're going to make a company policy around things that are so hypersensitive in the modern world in which we live. And some of these sensitivities have been buried for decades and generations that are now coming up and need attention. And whether that situation went good or bad, and certainly was in the media with a lot of things, I still think this has been a great little company run by humans that are flawed and had some bumps along the way, including a very big bump they had publicly. And if these bumps happen public for every company, Basecamp would not be alone with the way the media covered them. Regardless, I think it's great software. The growth story is there. The lessons that are here in entrepreneurship, you and I can apply, and I really enjoyed doing this particular case study. That's what I think, but I'm interested in what you think as well. Leave a comment down below. I'll answer as many as I can. Also, subscribe to Valuetainment Economics and hit the bell to get notifications of more case studies and other great content here on Valuetainment Economics. If you like this case study, go check out one of these Biz Doc classics. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Until next time, I'm Ellsworth with the Biz Doc, and I hope I left you better than I found you.